The morning sun caught the steam rising from Karen's coffee mug as she stepped onto her back patio. She stretched, admiring her perfectly manicured lawn, then turned toward the side gate she'd installed last month. The gate that led directly into my yard. But instead of the familiar wooden slats, she found herself staring at a solid brick wall. Her ceramic mug slipped from her fingers and shattered across the concrete. The sound echoed through the quiet neighborhood as reality crashed down on her harder than that mug. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My wife Sarah and I had just moved into our dream home on Maple Ridge Drive 3 months ago. After years of apartment living, we finally had our own space with a gorgeous half-acre lot surrounded by mature oak trees. The privacy was exactly what we'd been craving. The house needed some work, but the peaceful yard made it all worthwhile. That first week, we'd sit on our back deck every evening, listening to the birds and planning our garden. Then we met Karen. She lived in the house next door, a 2-story colonial with an HOA violation notice permanently affixed to her personality. Karen wasn't just the HOA president. She was the self-appointed guardian of all things proper and orderly in Riverside Estates. She introduced herself by marching onto our property the day after we moved in, clipboard in hand, informing us that our moving boxes visible through the garage window violated Section 12.4 of the HOA guidelines. At first, we tried to be good neighbors. We followed the rules, kept our lawn pristine, and even attended the monthly HOA meetings. But Karen had a special talent for making mountains out of molehills. Our bird feeder was 2 inches too tall. Our garden hose was the wrong shade of green. She once sent us a formal warning because our recycling bin was visible from the street for 47 minutes instead of the approved 45. The real trouble started when Karen began hosting her weekend garden parties. Every Saturday afternoon, she'd gather her book club, wine tasting group, or whatever collection of suburban socialites she could assemble. The problem was her yard wasn't quite big enough for her ambitions. She'd drop hints about how our properties would look so much better without the fence between them. She even offered to pay for landscaping that would create a more open flow between our yards. We politely declined every time. That fence was one of the reasons we'd bought the house. But Karen didn't handle rejection well. One morning in late September, I woke to the sound of power tools. Racing to the window, I saw contractors cutting a hole in our fence. Not her fence, our fence, on our property line. By the time I got outside, they'd already installed a gate complete with decorative iron hinges. Karen stood there supervising with a satisfied smile. She said the HOA board had approved the improvement for neighborhood connectivity and aesthetic flow. When I demanded to see the authorization, she waved her hand dismissively and said the paperwork was filed at the community center. Of course, when we checked, no such approval existed. The other board members claimed they'd never discussed it. But the gate was already there, and Karen had keys. The violations started immediately. That very weekend, her garden party guests began wandering into our yard. They'd stroll through like it was a public park, drinks in hand, commenting on our choice of plants. One woman actually picked flowers from Sarah's carefully tended rose bushes. When we confronted Karen, she laughed it off. She said we were being antisocial and that good neighbors share their blessings. We tried everything legal and proper. We sent certified letters. We filed complaints with the HOA board, which mysteriously never made it onto the meeting agendas. We even consulted a lawyer who confirmed we had a case but warned it would be expensive and time-consuming. Meanwhile, every weekend brought fresh invasions. Her guests treated our yard like an extension of her party space. The breaking point came during Karen's October wine night. We'd specifically asked her to keep her guests on her property because Sarah had just planted winter vegetables. We even put up temporary orange netting to mark the garden beds. It didn't matter. By the time we got home from dinner, her guests had trampled through the entire garden. Tomato plants were crushed, squash vines were torn, and someone had actually set their wine glass on top of our new lettuce seedlings. I found Karen laughing with her friends near our destroyed garden. When I showed her the damage, she slurred slightly and said plants grow back, but good times don't. That was it. Sarah and I looked at each other and knew we were done playing nice. That night, after the last guest stumbled home, we made a call to my friend Mike. He ran a construction company and owed me a favor from when I'd helped him with his business taxes. Mike arrived at 5 a.m. with a crew of 4 guys and a truck full of supplies. We'd already verified our property lines and secured the proper permits for a fence improvement. Technically, we were just repairing our fence, making it more secure and stable. The fact that this repair involved filling the gate opening with concrete blocks and mortar was just a construction detail. The work went faster than expected. By 7 a.m., they'd removed the gate and frame. By 9, the first courses of blocks were in place. Karen must have been sleeping off her wine night because she didn't emerge until nearly 10. I was spreading mortar when I heard her back door slam. Through the gap in the construction, I saw her walking toward the gate location, still in her silk pajamas and carrying her Saturday morning coffee. The scream when she realized what was happening probably woke up half the neighborhood. She came charging around to our front door, banging and yelling about destruction of property and lawsuits. Sarah calmly presented her with our property survey, the original fence permits, and photos of the unauthorized gate installation. We also had security camera footage of her contractors cutting into our fence without permission. Karen sputtered and threatened, but Mike's crew kept working. By noon, the wall was complete. We'd made sure to match the height of the existing fence perfectly. From our side, it looked like the fence had never been breached. From her side, well, she now had a lovely brick wall where her illegal access point used to be. The mortar would need time to cure, but the message was crystal clear. Monday morning brought the confrontation we'd expected. Karen had called an emergency HOA board meeting, demanding we tear down the wall. She stood at the podium, face red with rage, claiming we'd violated architectural standards and destroyed community property. But we came prepared. Our lawyer had reviewed everything, and we presented our case methodically. The original fence permits, the property survey, the lack of HOA approval for the gate, and most importantly, the security footage of her contractors trespassing on our property. The board president, Robert Ashford, looked increasingly uncomfortable as we laid out our evidence. He finally admitted that Karen had never brought the gate proposal to the board. She'd acted unilaterally, assuming her position gave her carte blanche to make improvements as she saw fit. The board's attorney, present via video call, confirmed that the HOA had no grounds to demand we remove the wall. In fact, we could sue for the trespassing and property damage. But Karen wasn't done. That night, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Our security cameras captured everything in crystal clear detail. At 2 a.m., she crept out with a can of red spray paint. She'd written, "Tear it down," across the brick wall before our motion lights caught her in the act. The look of panic on her face when she realized she was being recorded was priceless. This time, we didn't handle it privately. We filed a police report for vandalism and sent the footage to every member of the HOA board. The next meeting was standing room only. Neighbors we'd never met came to share their own stories of Karen's overreach. The elderly couple from Elm Street talked about how she demanded they remove a wheelchair ramp because it wasn't pre-approved. The young family from the corner house described how she'd threatened them with fines over their children's chalk drawings. The vote was unanimous. Karen was removed from her position as HOA president, effective immediately. The board also voted to implement new restrictions on board member authority, requiring majority approval for any property modifications. But the consequences didn't stop there. The vandalism charge stuck, and Karen was ordered to pay $2,000 in fines plus the cost of cleaning and repairing the wall. Her professional life crumbled too. Karen worked as a real estate agent, and news of her illegal gate installation and subsequent vandalism spread through the local real estate community like wildfire. Her broker called her into a meeting, and by the end of the week, she'd been quietly encouraged to find a new firm. The last I heard, she was working 3 towns over, her reputation in Riverside Estates thoroughly destroyed. The judge at her vandalism hearing was particularly unimpressed by her entitled attitude. When she tried to argue that the wall was an eyesore that decreased property values, he reminded her that she'd been the one to breach the fence in the first place. The final judgment included 30 days of community service specifically focused on respecting property boundaries. She spent her Saturdays picking up trash in public parks while wearing an orange vest, visible to all her former garden party guests driving by. Karen's face when the judge read the sentence was a mixture of shock and disbelief. Her lawyer had assured her the whole thing would be dismissed as a neighbor dispute, but the video evidence was undeniable. As the gavel came down, she slumped in her chair, finally understanding that her reign of HOA terror was officially over. The bailiff handed her the paperwork detailing her fines, community service schedule, and a restraining order preventing her from coming within 50 feet of our property. She signed with a shaking hand, her eyes filled with tears of frustration and humiliation.